Today on Locked On Red Wings, Steve Yzerman spoke to the media signaling an end to Detroit's free agency. How did he do? We're going to grade his free agency and talk about his comments.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty, Steve Yzerman spoke to the media today. As of recording this, and be yesterday by the time people are hearing this. And, you know, I think the thing that stood out to me the most, and we'll talk about all that, and we'll just do a knee-jerk reaction, overall grade on the free agency at the end. The thing that stood out to me the most at this media availability was his attitude. The attitude felt to me like a complete 180 from the end of the season media availability, where he was kind of, he was short, kind of aggressive, defensive. He was like borderline jovial in this one. Like he was cracking jokes. He seemed a lot more upbeat. I'm not going to read too much into it. It was just a stark contrast. It caught my eye.
Yeah, you know, I think, yeah, I mean, that's great. Like, you know, I want everyone to be in a good mood. I don't really know if that means to, are you okay?
I just read the mug, that's all. It says, Allison has a collection of mugs that have like really silly puns on them. This coffee mug has a cactus that says, "My daily prick me up."
That's good, actually. I kind of like it.
I love her, man. It's great.
what a legend. Yeah, I mean, like, it's great. I'm not really sure I read too much into it in terms of like it meaning anything. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, like he's in a good mood, so that means like there's a trade on the horizon. Like, I don't really know if that's
McDavid to Detroit.
Right. Like Steve Yzerman cracks joke. McDavid to Detroit. Like, I don't think it really implies anything, but yeah,
no.
Noticeable. The end of media availability was honestly, like, the word I kind of want to use is hostile in like the media room. Like it really was kind of tense, and this one seemed much more lax. And I feel like part of that is just the disappointment of the season, missing out on the playoffs. They choked another season away. He knew that the questions were going to suck. Whereas this one, well, I mean, like, seriously, like, I don't really have any other way to put it. Like, he knew that the questions were going to blow. And like this time, even though the questions may have been also not like super fun and uplifting, I think there was a little bit more of like, what do you want me to do? Like, as we already talked about on here earlier in the week, everybody just re-signed, like, which is a point he brought up pretty early. He was like, yeah, I mean, we had a lot of conversations, but like, it's hard for anything to materialize when everybody just stays where they are and everybody re-signs. I don't really fault him for that. There's plenty this offseason that I still want to see done and things that I do fault him for, but it takes two to tango.
Yeah, and that's really the heart of this conversation, breaking down his comments, was his comments about free agency and the trade market. He did specifically say, like, we had a handful of players we wanted to speak with that we didn't get the chance to talk to. And he specifically did mention, you know, Mitch Marner's name, whether that be a player he was planning. You got to do your due diligence, right? If he hits the market, you got to at least, you know, give him a call.
You're right. You're a fringe team that had the cap. Like, why not? Yeah, of course you're going to call.
And he said, like, you know, they wanted to talk to him, but they didn't get the chance because he was dealt to Vegas. And he's right. I don't know why. There are reasons why that are valid, why I understand why people are frustrated with Yzerman at this point. But this free agency, everybody, and he said it, everybody re-signed with their own team or already had their heart set where they were going to go. And that they already had their heart set where they were going to go comment really screamed to me like the Gavrikov one, because he went to New York and like took a kind of a discount to go there. I said it yesterday, right? You can't make a splash if there's no water. And there was just the free agency pool is very thin. I will talk about in segment 3, like our grade, like how we think he did based on what was available. But a lot of people are upset about his comments, right? They're like, that's not an excuse. And am I an Yzerbot? They keep calling people Yzerbots now. I'm like, am I an Yzerbot for just being like, he's right? Like, who was available in the market for them to get? Now, like, there were guys I wanted, right? Like, I would have taken, we were going to talk a little bit today about Brent Burns if he was available. I would have taken Brent Burns 1 year, $3 million. It would have been a great stopgap second pair. There are definitely guys he could have gotten that I would have loved. But, like, the market was so thin, I'm more relieved he didn't overpay for mediocre talent like he has in years past. He didn't sign a Sherratt contract. He didn't sign a whole contract. And don't get me wrong, this isn't me changing my stance, Scotty. Like, I still need Yzerman to take a swing. But as soon as Monday at 5 o'clock happened and everyone started re-signing, and it was already kind of the idea to begin with, right? We knew the free agent market was thin and beating out some of those other teams was going to be tough. But now more than ever, for Yzerman to take a swing, which I still deem as necessary, it's going to have to come through trade.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I think in terms of focusing on free agency specifically, the point you mentioned there is just the philosophical difference in, like the ideological difference in what people define as taking a swing, right? Like, if you are of the mindset that, we don't want any more of these, like, we're just spending money to spend money and we're getting more Comfers and Sherratts and Cops, etc. I agree with you. But I think that there is a contingency of the fan base out there that is more of the mindset of, if you go into the season with cap on the table, that's lame. And like, that's a failure. And I think that it's important to draw that line in the sand of, like, a swing does not mean just spend money willy-nilly. It's to go out and get an impact player. And I think that, we talked about it before free agency opened, that it was going to most likely be through trade. I think it is just going to be frustrating if on opening night the roster looks like it does today, and they went through the draft, didn't trade their pick, went through free agency, didn't sign anyone of note, and then went through after free agency and didn't trade for anybody. You don't do anything in any of the 3 stages of the offseason. That is where I think people get frustrated. So there is time left, and the offseason is not over, and there's still time to make a trade. But I think it's the culmination of all 3 of those.
Oh, for sure.
Which I know you understand, but like, I think that is where the frustration lies, is, there's a chance that you go through all 3 stages of the offseason and don't really add anything of note. And after last season, that's kind of inexcusable in my eyes.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, he did say, too, like, everyone's focusing on his comment about there being no free agents available. But, like, literally right after that, he was asked about the trade market. And he said that, after this weekend, right, because of the holiday, he's going to start calling around to other GMs and see if they have any needs that need to be filled, because he understands, and he did specifically say, this team needs another top 4D. Hopefully, he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but he mentioned it, right? He did say both.
Right, I forget who asked, so that's...
It was Will Birchfield, I think, from the ticket, who asked about top 6 forward,
right,
or bottom
said,
top 4D.
Do you want to add a top 6 or a top 4? And he went, well, in a perfect world, I'd like to add both. Like, and he said, I think he said, I'd be very interested in adding both of those things. So, like, I think that this is just kind of how the board fell free agency-wise. Right. Like, he knows that he's going to have to make his impact on the offseason via trade. And until that happens, you're kind of just playing the waiting game and seeing if an opportunity opens up.
Yeah, like, I know it's probably better for our views if we come on here and we're all heated over the thin free agent signings, but, like, in reality, we have to acknowledge that if we want him to make a swing, it's going to have to be through trade, and if it's going to be through trade, it's going to take a little bit longer for that to come through, because there's no race.
It does happen again, like,
right?
It's not like there's a trade deadline in the offseason. They can do that anytime over the next month. So
I said I'm willing to wait until, like, training camp, for him to make a trade for a top 6 forward or a top 4D before I make a final judgment on the offseason.
If we get into preseason games and the roster looks like it does right now on July 4th, then like that's a huge problem, and we'll be red in the face mad then. Yeah.
But again, he said that he was going to next week start calling GMs again and see what needs they need to be filled. One part he said I didn't love is that there are fewer teams that need to offload salary because the salary cap went up, but you still got to make it work. You have to make it happen. And he did, again, you mentioned that he said top 6 winger or top 4D because he was asked about it. And then later he did specifically say a top 4D, preferably right side, but doesn't have to be right side. So he acknowledges this team's needs. And I'm just willing, before I freak out, like I'm a little encouraged that he said he's going to start calling GMs again, like he's still exploring the trade market. But before I flip out and freak out, I'm going to give him until training camp to see what happens. Scotty, let's head to segment 2. When we come back, we'll talk about any of the other comments that he made that stood out to us. Stay tuned to segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. We've all been there, logging and on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories and not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Game Time Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you, and they give you an awesome panoramic seat view so you can see what you're looking at before you buy. And with Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. They got a handy little all-in toggle at the top that'll include any fees before you reach checkout, so you don't get that shock. The Game Time guarantee also has your back in case cancellations happen, you lose your job, whatever. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKDOWNNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, I thought, now this is not about free agency, but I wanted to make sure I brought it up because it's regarding the new CBA. He was asked by Ken Cal, by the way. It was a great question. Not a question I expected to be asked, but a pertinent one nonetheless. Asked him about what his thoughts on the 84-game season that is coming in the next CBA, as well as the reduction, or I guess I should say the cap, in preseason games at 4. And I would have thought that he would be a little more traditionalist and say like adding more games just adds more strain to the players. It's already a long season. He said no, I like it. He says it makes sense because with more teams, you're playing more teams, and with 84 games, it evens out the divisional games so that you play your divisional opponents more consistently than the other teams out there. So I thought that was an interesting perspective I hadn't considered when talking about the 84 game season.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I said something rather similar when we talked about it, but you don't consider the words that come out of my mouth. Yeah, I think...
Is your middle name Yzerman?
Yeah, Scott Yzerman Bentley, yep. I mean, obviously, I agree, though. I think that it is, as we talked about last week when we first brought it up, like you don't want the slippery slope to happen. You don't want 84 to turn into 104, but at the same time, just because of the expanded league, it really does make sense.
Yeah, and then I'm not shocked he didn't come out and say, like, I'm not a fan of the cap, but what he did say, I inferred as he isn't the biggest fan of the cap on the preseason of 4 games because he likes to get both of those groups a lot of action. But I find it myself hard-pressed to really care too much about the change.
He'll get over it. Like I don't think that's gonna be like a dig your heels in issue. I think it's just like the Wings very notably under Yzerman's tenure, but especially over the last couple of years, play a lot of preseason games. This year they play a ton because they want to get a lot of people playing time. So understand it from both perspectives. If you're going to expand the season, you probably got to cut the preseason, but At the same time, you want to get people on the ice, but you also don't want to hurt people. It's an imperfect system, and I don't really think it's going to be that big of a deal.
No, for sure not. Scotty, what else stood out to you that he said?
I think that's really the main bulk of it. I just, to me, the biggest thing that jumped out was just the candidness with wanting to still add more. Like there was no beating around the bush or hesitation in terms of like him just being very open about like, I still would really like to add more. And it wasn't just like, oh, I want to add more depth. He's like, no, I want to add like guys that would be the best players on the team. Like I want to add, like prominent players. But 31 other GMs would probably still like to add prominent players too. So we'll see.
Yes. I'm trying to think really what else. I mean, he cracked a joke, right? He was asked about the core of the team, I believe by Max, and Steve said, well, Brad Marchand at 37 just signed a 6-year deal, so I think I have Dylan Larkin for another 15 years, and that took me out. I was like, he like laughed, and I don't know if any of the media necessarily laughed, but it surprised me to be sure, because again, it goes back to what I led with, where the mood and the atmosphere from this press conference was really different, right? Where, like you mentioned at the end of the season rather, he was on guard, he was defensive, borderline hostile at times, because he has known that fans and the media were particularly hostile themselves, and he almost like bit back, and it didn't really paint a great picture for him in front of a lot of different fans. This time he was like, no, I mean, yeah, he just was kind of in a better mood. It was just shocking. It was just him cracking a joke. I'm just like, that's not the Steve I've come to know.
Right, yeah.
They did ask about the players they did acquire, right? And first and foremost, and I think this leads perfectly into our segment 3, which we'll do in a moment, but he said that as I sit here today, like, and I'm paraphrasing again, always know that I'm just paraphrasing, but as I sit here, like, I think this team is in a slightly better position than they were last year, which I think I agree with, but again, it goes back to what we were talking about, where slightly better is just not good enough.
Yeah, there's also, yeah. Like we're comparing. This is something I've said before on both Locked On shows that I am a part of. Like we need to stop comparing ourselves to ourselves. Okay, we need to stop comparing the Red Wings on July 4th, 2025 to the Red Wings of July 4th, 2024. Like we have to start comparing ourselves to bona fide playoff teams, because that is who the Red Wings are trying to become. We need to stop this. Oh, well, like he's good for a Red Wing, or he makes, he's an improvement over what we had. Well, okay, that we haven't made the playoffs in almost a decade. That doesn't move me anymore. I don't want to get just closer and closer, but still missing the playoffs. Like the goal is to compare yourself to the teams that are, in the playoffs every year. So
great point. Great point. Let's go to a quick break, Scotty. When we return, we'll just talk real quick, our knee-jerk grades for the signings that he did make. And then, hey, Carter Mazur is almost 200 pounds, which is pretty cool. So stay tuned to segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings.
Best shape of his life?
Best shape of his life? Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty. Yzerman made 5 signings, or was it 4? It was JVR, JBD, Ian Mitchell, Appleton. Wasn't there another player he signed for the AHL?
Yeah, there was I think a couple, yeah, but
can't even remember their names.
Then, like, you trade for John Gibson, like
right? And the acquisition of John Gibson, he re-signed his RFAs, but I don't know if I don't really want to count the RFAs unless you want to talk about their term.
Yeah.
But overall, where would you grade this free agency for Steve Yzerman?
I don't know, dude.
I'll go first then. I'll go first and I'll let you think about it.
If you have a prominent, you're confident in it answer, I'll take yours first, because yeah.
This was an A plus. No, I'm just kidding. It was in my eyes.
Lose it. Whoa.
This was a C plus for me. And I go with the plus more so out of the lack of the negative ads than the acquisitions they made. That sounds silly, but let me explain. In seasons past, Yzerman has, out of desperation, probably overpaid for middling players, right? Your Ben Sherratts, your Justin Holes, like he's trying to get the team better. This year, he avoided adding those bad contracts on middling players. People will be like, oh, he overpaid with Appleton. He didn't. That was literally the going rate for his contract. It was spot on, $100,000 more than the estimate. I don't even count that as an overpay. Appleton is going to play a little bit of PK with this team. Appleton's going to play a third line checking role. He is going to help this team transition out of the offensive zone. I think he makes your depth better. JVR is, if you replace Tarasenko with JVR, he's on a cheaper contract. He's going to provide you with more offense, and he's a great net front presence. He probably will play a little bit of power play too as your net front presence. I think he'll give you more production than you saw out of Tarasenko last year. That's an upgrade for your third line. I don't want to necessarily give him the credit for Soderblom and Carter Mazur, but this bottom six is going to be better because I expect step forwards out of those guys. Yzerman drafted both of those guys as well, but I'm not taking that into account for this grade. But I do think that the bottom six overall is better than it was last season. JBD might be your sixth right side defenseman, and you did not pay a lot for him, less than $1 million. John Gibson acquisition. You did the best out of anyone on the goalie market, acquiring him, and didn't give up a whole heck of a lot to do that. But everything that I just said that I praised, right? Your third line acquisitions, your third pair acquisition, your maybe starting goalie or maybe 1A goalie, that is getting better on the margins. So while I don't think he overpaid for anybody, I don't think he gave out too much term, and I think this team got better on the margins, I can't in good conscience give it more than a C plus because those biggest holes are still empty, which is the top six winger and the top 4D. And of course, that is still me taking into account, the free agent market was very thin, right? But as of right now, you got maybe marginally better in a position you needed to get better, your depth forwards, but wasn't the most glaring need of the offseason. So if a C is an average passing grade, I give him a C plus. I think anything above a C plus, an A or a B, is being a little disingenuous, personally.
Yeah, I was going to go with a C.
Fair.
I don't know, man. I feel like if you want to throw Gibson in there and include him in that, then maybe that alone is the difference between a C and a C plus to me. But free agency in a vacuum, it wasn't a failure because they didn't, sign anyone that's terrible for $8 million or anything like that, right? They didn't make any dumb moves that I disagree with, but didn't really add a whole lot. I don't want to just re-go down everybody they just added because you did, but I feel like this was the bare minimum. Sounds
no bare minimum too, is fine.
That's kind of how I feel. Is it's just they the Wings literally added just borderline league minimum contracts to fill in spots, and that was pretty much it. The only thing that really changes that is I guess maybe kind of JVR, but the trading for Gibson was legitimately a good move that I really like. That is more than just that. So
and Gibson is what drives it to a C plus for me. Everything else you said, I agree with. I think you're spot on. I think the acquisition of JVR is bare minimum. You improved your bottom six. You didn't overpay. You gave him decent terms. Same thing with JBD, Jared Bernard-Docker, and, of course, Mason Appleton. Those are all, you made yourself better on the margins. but that's the bare minimum expectation right now, even with this free agency pool, which is why he gets a C+ in my boat, a C in your boat. Those aren't failing grades. Like it's okay. A C+ is okay because it was an okay free agency. You avoided the massive mistakes.
It wasn't like a catastrophic failure. It just wasn't good. Like
right.
You know? It was just
it was going to be really hard for it to be good because again, quoting Sean Shapiro, there are 29 fan bases that are asking themselves right now, how did our team get better through free agency? Everyone's going through this right now, except for your Carolinas who got Ehlers, your New Yorks who got Gavrikov, and Vegas.
Yeah.
Everybody else either stayed the same or got worse.
Yeah,
so,
go listen, like legitimately go listen to other like Locked On shows. Like everybody's just kind of looking around like, okay, like all the
what now?
3 teams, cool.
Yep. All right, Scotty, the last thing is development camp almost had a scrimmage, but apparently there were too many injuries, so it didn't happen. That's never a great thing to hear, but I'm not going to worry too much about it.
Than anything,
right. But Dan Cleary mentioned that Carter and Chris Draper have both mentioned at this point that Carter Mazur is up to almost 200 pounds. He was at 174 when he was drafted. So he is up almost probably over 30 pounds heavier, getting to NHL weight, which is going to, for his play style, is going to be super beneficial to him.
That was exactly what I was going to say. With the way that he plays hockey, that's super beneficial for the Wings and obviously super beneficial for him. I mean, if he can be kind of that bottom 6, honestly, like everybody keeps comparing his play style to Bertuzzi, which obviously like Bert peaked at a 30-goal scorer, but like if you can get that style in your bottom 6 for the next 5 to 7 years, that's a big win. So
yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be a 3rd or 4th liner. He's going to be a checking forward that's going to bring an energy to that 3rd and 4th line.
Sure.
I can't wait to watch Carter Mazur in a Red Wings uniform for a full season. I'm right now, as of today, I'm penciling him in on their 4th line. And that is, I'm going to be pumped. Scotty, final thoughts.
We ball, baby.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode on Monday. Stay tuned for that. We got a whole week before we go down to 3 days a week. We have one more week of 5 days a week before we go down to 3 into off-season mode. Going to be interesting what we talk about because...
Well, we're going to hopefully more moves are on the horizon. Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah, or else we're going to be... your Mount Rushmore's type territory. Stay tuned. The Locked On Red Wings.
Mount Rushmore of Locked On Red Wings hosts?
Well, there's been 4, so...
yeah.
Was that the joke? Did I just... Okay, all right.
No, it's cool. Your team every day. See ya. Thanks, Brian.
Have a good and safe 4th of July weekend.
Yes.